what would make 9 experienced hikers cut their way out of their tent in the middle of a freezing Russian night, without shoes, without proper clothing, and run into the darkness? What could possibly be so terrifying that death by frostbite seemed like the better option? This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident, a mystery that has haunted investigators, scientists, and conspiracy theorists for over 6 decades. January 1959. The northern Ural Mountains. A group of 9 young hikers set out on what was supposed to be an ambitious but manageable expedition. All of them were experienced, all of them were trained, and none of them came back alive. But what really happened up there? Let's rewind. The group was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, an engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't inexperienced. In fact, this expedition was meant to earn him a prestigious Grade 3 hiking certification, the highest at the time. The team consisted of 8 men and 2 women, all students or recent graduates. Skilled skiers, strong, intelligent, adventurous, the kind of people who knew what they were doing. One member, Yuri Yudin, turned back early due to health issues. That decision would save his life. The remaining 9 continued deeper into the Ural Mountains, toward a mountain called Kolat-Syakhl. The name translates to Dead Mountain. Not ominous at all, right? By late January, weather conditions worsened. Snowstorms reduced visibility. Temperatures dropped to negative 30 degrees Celsius. That's negative 22 Fahrenheit. Brutally cold. On February 1st, they set up camp on the slope of Kolat-Syakhl instead of descending to a more sheltered forest area. Why? Possibly because they lost visibility and didn't want to lose altitude progress. That night was the last time they were seen alive. When they failed to return by their expected date, search parties were sent out. At first, there wasn't much concern. Experienced hikers often ran late. But days passed, then weeks. Finally, on February 26th, rescuers found their tent. And what they discovered made no sense. The tent was partially buried in snow, but still standing. Inside were their belongings: boots, jackets, food, cameras. But here's the part that stopped everyone cold. The tent had been slashed open from the inside, not torn by wind, not ripped by animals. Cut open from within. Why would seasoned hikers slice their own escape route instead of using the entrance? Outside the tent, footprints led away into the snow. Some barefoot, some in socks, some in a single shoe. The footprints suggested they left in a relatively calm manner, not sprinting chaotically. So they weren't being chased? The trail led about a mile downhill to the edge of a forest. Under a large cedar tree, investigators found the first 2 bodies, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. They were barefoot, dressed only in underwear. Their hands were burned. There had been a small fire beneath the tree. The branches above were broken up to 15 feet high, as if someone had climbed the tree in desperation. Were they trying to see something, or escape something? Between the cedar tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were found, including Igor Dyatlov himself. They appeared to be attempting to return to the tent. Why go back? Did they think the danger had passed? The remaining 4 hikers weren't found until 2 months later, buried under snow in a ravine. And this is where the mystery deepens. Unlike the first 5, these 4 had massive internal injuries. 1 had a fractured skull, 2 had crushed chests so severe that one investigator said the force was comparable to a car crash. But here's the terrifying part. There were no external wounds corresponding to the internal trauma. No defensive injuries, no obvious signs of struggle, almost like an immense pressure had been applied evenly. One of the women, Lyudmila Dubinina, was missing her tongue. Yes, missing. Also parts of her lips and facial tissue. Natural decomposition? Possibly. But it fueled rumors for decades. And if that wasn't enough, some of their clothing showed elevated levels of radiation. Radiation. In 1959, in the Soviet Union. Now ask yourself, avalanche. That was the official explanation for years. The theory says a small slab avalanche may have struck the tent, forcing them to flee quickly. That could explain why they cut their way out and ran. But here's the problem. The slope angle was relatively shallow, not typical avalanche terrain. The tent wasn't crushed, the footprints were intact, and no clear avalanche debris was found. So if not an avalanche, what then? Military testing? Some speculate secret Soviet weapons tests were happening nearby. There were reports of glowing orange spheres. Could the hikers have witnessed classified military activity? Witnesses described strange lights. Were they silenced? The radiation on clothing adds fuel to this theory. But counterpoint? Some of the hikers worked in facilities where radioactive materials were handled. Contamination might not have been unusual. Still, it doesn't explain the panic. Then there's the infrasound theory. Strong winds blowing over the mountain could have created something called a Kármán vortex street. This phenomenon can generate low-frequency infrasound, sound waves below human hearing. These waves can induce anxiety, panic, nausea, even irrational fear. Imagine being in a tent at night, hearing nothing, but feeling overwhelming dread. Could that have driven them out? But would trained hikers abandon survival instincts over a sound they couldn't hear? Another theory, a snow slab collapse, a smaller, less dramatic form of avalanche that wouldn't leave obvious signs. In 2020, a new investigation by Russian authorities concluded this was the likely cause. They recreated models. They tested snow physics. Their conclusion? A delayed slab avalanche caused the injuries and panic. Yet skeptics argue it still doesn't explain everything. Why split up? Why not stay together? Why build a small fire instead of digging snow shelters immediately? Why were some partially dressed while others wore extra clothing taken from the dead? That suggests time passed. Decision-making happened. This wasn't a 60-second disaster. And what about the missing tongue? Forensic experts say scavenging animals and decomposition in a water stream could explain it. Gruesome, but natural. And the radiation? Likely minor contamination from previous work environments. One haunting detail. The final entry in their camera film showed them laughing, setting up camp, unaware of what was coming. Ordinary young people, smiling, alive. What really makes this story unsettling isn't aliens or secret weapons. It's the human element. 9 intelligent people faced something so frightening, or so forceful, that they left warmth and safety behind. Psychologists have analyzed their behavior patterns. Some suggest paradoxical undressing, a phenomenon in extreme hypothermia where victims feel overheated and remove clothing. That explains why some were nearly naked. As hypothermia progresses, mental confusion sets in. Decision-making deteriorates. Perhaps after fleeing an initial threat, they tried to survive in the forest. 2 made a fire. 3 tried to return to the tent. 4 built a snow den in the ravine. It paints a picture of struggle, not instant chaos, but desperate survival attempts. Still, one question lingers. What caused the first moment of terror? Was it a shifting slab of snow pressing against the tent? A thunderous crack in the night? military flares lighting the sky, or something else entirely? The Soviet investigation at the time concluded with a famously vague statement. The cause of their deaths was a compelling natural force. Compelling natural force. That's it. Case closed. Or was it? The Soviet Union wasn't known for transparency. Many documents were classified. Families were left with partial answers. Over the decades, the Dyatlov Pass Incident became a cultural phenomenon. Books, documentaries, films, and countless theories. Aliens, Yeti, secret KGB operations, sound weapons, even portal theories. But often the simplest explanations are the most terrifying. Nature, unpredictable, unforgiving, indifferent. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the case. In 2020, they reaffirmed the snow slab avalanche theory. Computer simulations suggested a delayed collapse could have occurred hours after they pitched the tent. They could have injured some severely without destroying the tent entirely. Faced with the risk of a larger avalanche, they fled, in darkness, in minus 30-degree temperatures. Once outside, hypothermia would set in quickly. Within minutes, fingers numb. Within an hour, confusion. Within hours, death. It doesn't require conspiracy, just a chain of terrible circumstances. Yet for many, the unanswered emotional questions remain stronger than the scientific ones. Why didn't they return immediately? Why no signs of greater avalanche damage? Why the radiation? Why the strange injuries? And perhaps the biggest question of all, if you were in that tent that night, what would you have done? Would you trust the mountain or run? The Dyatlov Pass incident reminds us of something deeply uncomfortable. We like to believe we are in control, that skill, training, intelligence, these protect us. But sometimes, nature doesn't care. 9 lives ended on a cold mountain with a name that already warned them, Dead Mountain. And maybe the scariest part isn't that we don't know exactly what happened. It's that we probably do. A sudden natural event, panic, darkness, freezing wind, human error under extreme stress. Nothing supernatural. Just the raw, brutal reality of survival gone wrong. But here's something powerful. Despite decades of mystery, their story lives on. Not as a horror tale, but as a reminder. Respect the wilderness. Prepare for the unexpected. And understand how quickly situations can change. The Dyatlov hikers weren't foolish thrill seekers. They were ambitious young adventurers chasing achievement. And their final moments continue to echo through history. So what do you believe happened on that mountain? Avalanche, military experiment, something we still don't understand? Let me know your theory in the comments. I genuinely want to hear it. If you found this deep dive fascinating, hit that like button so more people can discover the story. Subscribe for more mysteries, historical deep dives, and unexplained events. And check out the other videos on this channel if you're in the mood for more stories that make you question what you think you know. Because sometimes, the coldest mysteries burn the longest.